The studio lights were barely warm when the tension began to coil, subtle at first, like a wire pulled just a little too tight. Samuel L. Jackson sat on the Today Show couch, jacket crisp, posture relaxed but alert, the way it always was when he stepped into a room full of expectations. Savannah Guthrie smiled toward the camera, her voice smooth as she welcomed viewers back from commercial, the familiar cadence of morning television rolling forward as if nothing unusual waited just beneath the surface. Jackson nodded politely, offering a quick grin to the audience, and for a few seconds it felt like any other celebrity interview, light, friendly, predictable. The first question was harmless, even warm. Savannah congratulated him on his latest project, praising his longevity, his unmistakable presence, the way his voice alone could command a scene. Jackson chuckled, thanked her, and leaned back into the couch cushions. He spoke about storytelling, about the responsibility of actors to bring truth to their roles, about how he still felt lucky after all these years. The control room relaxed. Producers exchanged satisfied glances. The segment was landing just as planned. Then Savannah shifted. She referenced a comment Jackson had made at a recent industry event, a remark that had spread across social media overnight, clipped and reposted, dissected by strangers who had never heard the full context. Her tone didn't change, still calm, still professional, but the air did. Jackson's fingers began tapping softly against his knee, a rhythm almost lost beneath the hum of the studio. He answered carefully, explaining what he meant, emphasizing nuance, intent, the danger of sound bites stripped of meaning. Savannah nodded, but pressed again. She quoted a critic, then another. She asked whether Jackson understood why some viewers felt offended. A flicker crossed his face, surprise first, then irritation. He laughed once, short and sharp, trying to keep things light. "You know how the internet is," he said. "It eats context for breakfast." The audience chuckled. Savannah smiled, but she didn't retreat. She asked if he regretted the wording. Jackson straightened slightly. "I regret people not listening," he replied. His voice was still steady, but the warmth had cooled. The camera lingered on his face, catching the shift, the tightening around his eyes. Savannah interjected gently, reminding him that public figures carried influence, that words mattered beyond intention. Jackson nodded, but his foot stopped tapping. "I've been doing this a long time," he said. "I know words matter. That's why I choose them carefully." She followed up anyway, asking if he'd apologize to those who felt hurt. The silence that followed was brief, but heavy. Jackson glanced toward the camera, then back at Savannah. "I won't apologize for something I didn't mean the way it's being framed," he said. His voice grew louder, not shouting, but firm enough to cut through the studio's polished calm. A producer's voice crackled faintly through an earpiece, too quiet for the audience to hear. Savannah leaned forward slightly, attempting to clarify, but Jackson continued, frustration spilling out now. He spoke about media cycles, about controversy being milked for clicks, about interviews turning into ambushes disguised as conversations. The audience shifted uncomfortably. The band's instruments sat untouched, waiting for a cue that wasn't coming. When Savannah interrupted him to regain control of the segment, something snapped. Jackson stood up abruptly. The sudden movement jolted the set, chair legs screeching against the floor, the sound sharp enough to make a few audience members gasp. Cameras scrambled to adjust, one cutting wide, another hesitating on a close-up of Savannah's startled expression. Jackson's chest rose and fell as he looked down at her, not angry in a theatrical way, but intensely, unmistakably fed up. "I came here to talk about my work," he said, each word deliberate, not to be cornered into a headline. Savannah opened her mouth to respond, but the moment had already slipped beyond the boundaries of morning TV decorum. Producers stood just out of frame, hands raised in cautious signals. A floor manager edged closer, whispering urgently. The red light on the main camera flickered as the director debated cutting to commercial. Jackson shook his head, a humorless smile crossing his face. "This right here," he added, gesturing vaguely toward the cameras, "this is exactly what I'm talking about." The feed finally cut wide, Savannah attempting to smooth things over for viewers at home, thanking Jackson for coming in even as the situation unraveled in real time. Applause sputtered, confused and uneven. Jackson took a step back, then another, ignoring the offered hand of a producer trying to calm him. Security appeared, not forceful, just present, guiding rather than pushing. As Jackson was escorted off the set, the studio buzzed with nervous energy. Savannah remained seated, shoulders squared, professionalism snapping back into place as she addressed the camera, promising a break, promising to return. But the damage was already done. In control rooms and living rooms alike, people leaned closer to their screens, sensing they'd just witnessed something raw, unscripted, and impossible to rewind. Behind the scenes, whispers flew. Assistants typed furiously. Phones buzzed with alerts as clips began uploading in real time. And somewhere between the fading echo of Jackson's footsteps and the forced brightness of the next segment, the Today Show had crossed from routine television into something far messier, an argument that refused to stay contained, already stretching beyond the studio walls. Backstage, the air felt thicker than it had on set, heavy with the kind of tension that didn't dissolve once the cameras stopped rolling. Samuel L. Jackson paced the narrow hallway outside the green room, his footsteps sharp against the polished floor, jacket slung over his shoulder now as if even the fabric had become an irritation. A production assistant hovered nearby, unsure whether to offer water or space, eventually choosing neither and retreating a few steps. Jackson exhaled slowly, running a hand over his shaved head, the adrenaline of the moment still buzzing through his veins. Behind him, the muted sounds of the show continued, a cheery transition music bleeding faintly through the walls, absurdly upbeat given what had just unfolded. Jackson let out a short laugh, not amused so much as incredulous. Morning television, he muttered to no one in particular. Always smiling when the knives come out. Savannah Guthrie appeared moments later, her heels clicking softly, notes still clutched in her hand like a shield. Her expression was controlled, but there was strain beneath it, a tightness around her mouth that hadn't been there on camera. For a second, they simply looked at each other, two professionals suddenly stripped of the buffer that live television usually provides. "That didn't have to happen like that," she said finally, her voice lower now, more personal. Jackson stopped pacing. "You're right," he replied. "It didn't." He held her gaze, his anger no longer explosive, but settled, heavy. "But when you keep pushing for an apology I don't believe in, what do you expect me to do? Smile and play along?" Savannah defended her position calmly, explaining the pressure of live TV, the expectations of viewers, the responsibility she felt to ask the questions people were already arguing about online. She spoke of balance, of giving voice to criticism as well as praise. Jackson listened, arms crossed, jaw set. When she finished, he shook his head slowly. "There's a difference between asking and cornering," he said. "I've done thousands of interviews. I know when a conversation turns into a trap." The words hung between them. For a moment, it looked like the argument might reignite, but instead Jackson sighed, the fight draining out of him. "Look," he added, quieter now, "I respect what you do. But I won't let anyone turn me into a caricature for clicks." Savannah nodded, not fully conceding, but acknowledging the point. She offered a brief apology, not for the questions themselves, but for how the exchange escalated. Jackson accepted it with a curt nod, though the disappointment lingered in his eyes. There would be no friendly wrap-up, no return to the couch. The bridge, for now, was burned. Minutes later, Jackson exited the building through a side door, avoiding the main entrance where fans and cameras often waited. The cold air hit him like a reset, sharp and sobering. His phone buzzed almost immediately, texts from his publicist, missed calls stacking up, notifications exploding faster than he could process them. He didn't look. Instead, he stood for a moment on the sidewalk, hands in his pockets, staring up at the gray sky as if grounding himself before stepping back into the noise. Inside the studio, Savannah resumed her role with practiced ease, her smile back in place as the show rolled on. But even as she laughed at a lighter segment moments later, the earlier clash lingered, unspoken but unmistakable. Producers whispered about damage control, about statements, about whether the clip would be pulled or left to circulate. They all knew the answer. It was already everywhere. By mid-morning, social media had chosen sides. Short clips, some cropped to remove context, others replayed endlessly, fueled outrage and applause in equal measure. Hashtags trended, commentators weighed in, some praising Jackson for standing his ground, others accusing him of overreacting. Think pieces bloomed within hours, dissecting tone, power dynamics, and the role of morning shows in shaping public narratives. Jackson finally checked his phone in the back of the car, scrolling silently as his driver navigated traffic. He read a few messages, ignored many more, then locked the screen. "They'll argue about this for a week," he said aloud. "Then move on to the next thing." Later that day, brief statements were released. The Today Show emphasized its commitment to tough but fair interviews. Jackson's team reiterated his respect for journalism while standing firm on his refusal to apologize. No one admitted fault outright. No one fully closed the door. Yet the moment stuck. Viewers remembered the chair scraping across the floor, the flash of anger, the sudden reminder that even the smoothest broadcasts could crack under pressure. For Jackson, it became another chapter in a long career defined by speaking plainly, even when it made people uncomfortable. For Savannah, it was a reminder of the fine line between accountability and confrontation, a line that could vanish in a heartbeat. And somewhere between the scrolling feeds and the fading outrage, the argument settled into television lore, not just as a heated exchange, but as a glimpse of what happens when carefully scripted formats collide with unscripted human limits, live and impossible to take back.